Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 3 o'clock panel today. We're going to talk about working in the industry, and I'm joined by some great people to actually help explain how they're working in the industry. So I'll ask them, first of all, to start by introducing themselves and talking a little about what they're working now and how they got there. So if you'd like to start, Alex.
Sure. My name's Alex Beddows. I am an EXPO environment artist at That's No Moon. Before That's No Moon, I was at Respawn as a senior, shipping Jedi Survivor. I've been in the industry for roughly 12 years, but it hasn't all been AAA. I've come through a kind of strange route doing mobile, indie, iGaming, but now residing in AAA.
I'm Jonjo Hemmens. I'm a senior environment artist at That's No Moon. I graduated from Falmouth University in 2019, so I'm alumni. Since then, I've worked at Antimatter Games, Creative Assembly, and Rocksteady. Now I get to work with this guy.
My name is Bart. I'm working at 1010 Games as a mid-level animator. Similar to Jonjo, I graduated Falmouth not too long ago, I think 1 year after you. And yeah, that's about it. It's my first industry job, so very excited to see what comes soon.
I'm Matt Brett. I'm a character artist at 1010 Games. I've been in the industry at the same time as Bart, roughly around 3-ish years now. 1010 Games is my first game studio, and I'm alumni from Falmouth as well.
How you doing? I'm Clifford Cael. I am currently working as a junior producer at Yogscast Games. Before that, I was a usability researcher of Team 17. And I've been in the industry just coming up on 2 years now.
Hi, I'm Kieran Goodson. I'm a senior environment artist at the Chinese Room, currently on Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. Before that, I worked for 3 years on Sniper Elite 5 over at Rebellion in Oxford, graduating from Coventry University in 2019. So coming up to my 5 years anniversary in the industry.
Thank you very much. So welcome all, and I've got a few questions that I've been given to sort of ask, and we'll probably branch off on those. But I'll start off by asking Alex, first of all, why do you enjoy working in the industry? It's probably a good start, because obviously people are setting out and they want to know why they should bother, I think.
It's bold of you to assume I enjoy it. It's honestly, it sounds like a cliche, but it's being able to really push yourself, and it isn't easy. I think that's the one thing I would say. It's not easy. It's really stressful most of the time, and you're always trying to put out a fire or solve a problem. And if you enjoy doing that, if you actually enjoy problem solving and pushing yourself, it's amazing. You'll love it. But it is it's non-stop. I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just, you'll solve one problem and then you'll get a new JIRA come through, which is you got a new problem to solve. And it's great, that's the one I'll work on. And seeing the product at the end, all these annoying little tasks you didn't want to do, come together to make a great game is a very rare experience you get. That's really what I like about it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good thing.
So for me, I kind of just always enjoyed being creative. And I couldn't really see myself working a different job, so I had to just go into games. And also similar to Jonjo, I just really enjoyed playing games throughout my whole life, and being able to work on something that's going to give other people the similar experience, it's just amazing. And also just it's really cool that the games industry is a fairly social workplace as well, because you have to chat with people. And that's something really nice, because you'll go ask about what do we need to do for this animation, what's the design, then you also start chatting about random stuff. So that's it doesn't really feel like work even, especially if you enjoy doing your thing. So yeah, it's great.
I worked in the industry a long time ago, and it's finding your own tribe. It's really nice that you work with. So I know exactly what you mean by that. So Matt, how about you?
Well, the only thing I really enjoyed doing when I was young was drawing, and then as I got older and I kind of did more with technology, that branched out into sculpting and modeling through college, and I just kind of took it up from there. And I just enjoy making characters. It's the main thing I do, and the fact that the industry is so social, and there's all these things that we get to go to, and these events, and just how social the workplace is, as Bart said before. It's just overall super enjoyable for me.
I think it's because I don't think there's anything else I could ever work on I could care about as much. I grew up playing games, and it's always been like it's something I just fell in love with. I cut my teeth in IT, and I was like, that's fine. It's still computers. I still enjoy it. But there's never going to be anything that will match the same level of like joy in my heart as like, shipping a good product, seeing people's reviews being like, I love this game. This game is so addictive. I can't put it down. This game's amazing. And just that surge of positive emotion and seeing something you've worked on, like really resonate with people. I don't think any other, at least for me, any other industry could ever match that, in a professional context. I think it could only be got within games.
It's that release of an object, isn't it? And you see what other people think, which is your driving force. Yeah. And Kieran?
For me, I came close to pursuing film and editing instead, but I chose games because they shaped me growing up. Managed to escape some horrible social situations by playing games, and I think that what makes games so interesting and so exciting to be in is because we have that sort of fourth dimension of time over the experience, whereby, yes, you have films which are, flat screen 2D, and yes, your perception of that changes over a character arc and over a story, but it's the gaming element and the interactivity of that product that actually is exciting to be a part of, because you as an audience member, you as a player, have agency over certain stories, and that's a dimension that is exclusively inherent to games. It's not something that films or radio or like even books can even offer you. So that's what I enjoy.
That's cool. That's a good answer. I think it is very intimate, unlike film and TV. Is that you're working on something that different people interpret in different ways, and it's that sort of almost touching the people who play your game.
Experience.
It's almost tactile, which is quite nice. Thank you. Yeah. So that's the second question, because a few people have touched on it already. It's not always easy going. It's not always very smooth between what you actually sort of work on and what actually the final product is and how it's received. So similar thing, but same sort of thing. But what challenges have you actually faced while you've been working on a game? And that might involve working from home or working actually within the studio, or how well things have been received as well. That would be interesting to know.
I think one thing which is like, especially for creators, is it's an industry which is different to others for the sake of, about any creative industry really. Like it's pure passion, and to the detriment of the artist, because you are always going to want to make something better. Yeah. Like I had an old art director and said it stuck with me. It's like your art's never finished. You can always polish it. You can always make it bigger. You can always make it better. And the hardest thing has been as an artist, especially as you progress and you get more and more responsibility, you can't let your own artistic ego get in the way of the product. You have to say stop at some point. And it's so hard when you're so passionate about the product you're making that you want to take it further, you want to make it better, but a game has to ship, and the game, we can't overscope and all these sorts of things. And it's really hard to park your own ego or just accept, right, this is a product, we're making a game. We're not making, it's not your product, it's not your thing. You're making it for someone else, and you have to stop at some point and allow it to just be what it is. And when you're constantly inspired by this industry, if anyone's played the Last of Us games, you're looking, it's I want to make that. But every studio is different. Every studio has different timelines and different budgets and different team sizes. And so as an artist, being having to say, all right, we're not that, we're not this, because of all these things outside of my control, is really hard to swallow sometimes. It's a really hard thing to not let put you down or get you down. I mean, that's probably the thing throughout my entire career I've always dealt with. I think probably everyone always has. And you always will, because art's never finished. You always carry it on. I think that's something for me that I struggle with a lot.
That's another observation. How do you deal with it? How do you have any particular
producer tell me to stop?
Deadlines.
Yeah.
Deadlines.
Deadlines, yeah. There's only so much you can do at any time. Okay. Bartosz.
So honestly, because I've been in the industry for not a long time yet, just coming up on 3 years, and it's been the same company we just started as I joined. It's been pretty much a smooth sailing for me, really.
Yeah.
So I would say the biggest challenge for me is just waking up. Just not a fan of the early mornings. But yeah, other than that, maybe like sometimes you get this like super crazy idea you think will make the game really great. You go to design and they're just like, we thought about that, but no. And you're just like, damn it, I thought I had something. But that's not really a challenge, more of like, just don't feel good. But yeah, that's about it.
Thank you very much. And Matt,
Well, I'm in a similar position to Bart, where like the company's a very recently made company. Like it was made as we were finishing uni. I think I was the first junior to join, and it was a really small team. And they had all the devs were seniors from a different studio, so they kind of had the idea of how a studio works and all that. So throughout the like almost 3 years that I've been there, it's been mega smooth sailing. And the nature of my job, it's like the assets that I make, they don't take very long to make. So I don't get like mega attached to them. Like, oh, I've made like this person as a Funko Pop, and they're not in the game anymore. I'm not going to be heartbroken over it. But yeah, I'd say the same thing. It's just like keeping a consistent, work schedule and
not getting too attached to the work that you do. So
yeah. It's been like mega smooth for me. I've not really faced any massive issue throughout the.
And long may it continue that way.
Yeah, long may it continue. It's a good time.
Clifford.
I feel like I'm going to like change the dynamic here of like who's new and is going to like mention a real not that getting up in the morning isn't a real problem. We all face that one. For me, it is accepting your limitations, especially when you're new. It can be really, really tough because depending on how you enter a team, what teams you're entering, you may not have like other juniors alongside with you. And you could end up comparing yourself to a lead, and you'll make mistakes, and you're like, "I screwed that up. That's on me." And you can end up being really regretful and mournful of a game. You just have to learn to like it's part of the learning process. Something my boss told me is when he worked as a printer, the first time he did the guillotine wrong and destroyed a sheet. He's like, "You'll never make that mistake again." It has to happen. The best thing you can do is learn from your mistakes. Throw your hands up and say, yeah, I was responsible for that. I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to grow from it. People expect you to make mistakes, especially when you're new. Your own head is your worst enemy on that front. You're your own worst critic. Of like, everyone's going to think I'm an idiot, I'm a moron. It's like, I screwed this up. Most people on your team won't notice, or they won't care. They'll just be like, all right, let's go fix it and get it done. No one I've found this industry is ever really out to get you. Most people really just want to prop each other up because we do difficult work. No one goes into the job being like, trying to put anyone down, I think.
Yeah, good advice. And Kieran?
Yeah, I mean, to leapfrog off of that, communication is always just such a core skill that nobody seems to talk about because there's often so much focus on the technical aspects of how a game gets put together, but then you realize how vital producers are and leads and directors, and they're trying to communicate down a vision to a core team. If everyone is on a different page, then you end up with a product that looks nothing like what it was originally intended, which may be dissatisfying to an audience who had certain expectations, which again, if you're working under a big publisher, as a developer, you don't have any control over the marketing campaign that goes out. You don't get to say which screenshots get put out or in which order they get put out. So it's almost as if the game gets made in 3 stages. It gets made in pre-production, on the script, in planning, on Miro boards, however the directors envision the game. Then you've got the core production of that title, and then actually how that's being marketed and all the post-production stuff. 3 different versions of a game. They're not necessarily aligned, and communication actually helps to streamline that process and tie a core thread through each one of those things. And you will end up making a different game than the one you set out to do. But it's just down to communication. And it's just such a difficult skill to get right, because you might have a junior or someone who comes on board at a lower level in the hierarchy that's an expert communicator, but they don't have the responsibility of communicating anything. And as you move up the hierarchies, you take on more responsibility. You will learn how much more important communication might be, over some of those technical skills. And actually, as you do become a lead or a director, you have to delegate a lot of your original tasks in the first place. So you'll have to spend more time developing your communication skills, your leadership skills, hosting panels, talking to people. And again, those are skills that you can be constantly building throughout your career, which is why an expo day like this today is beneficial for everybody involved, because you'll learn how to do it, and it gets easier with time, but it's still a tricky one to manage, even 10, 20, 30 years into a career.
It's a very astute observation, especially when team sizes the way they are. You don't get any one person with their entire vision carried through.
Especially in a pre-pandemic world where, some of these smaller indie teams as well would have been 10, 20, 30 people in the same room. You could spin around and talk to the programmer.
Yeah.
It's much more difficult to do nowadays. You've got teams. And I feel like that's a bit of a scapegoat that studios tend to put out, which is, this project was a failure because we had the pandemic and everybody had to switch on to Teams and virtual communication platforms, but ultimately as an individual it's you that has to take responsibility.
Yeah.
And if there's been a miscommunication, like you were saying, you have to put your hands up and say, look, I slipped up there and this is how I'm going to make it right in this situation, and this is how we should do things moving forward. It's just not fair to blame communication issues on one individual. It's usually a network of people who have just missed each other in some degree. And again, it's the director's responsibility to make sure that everything is falling in line, but it's also the leads and the people managers that should be constantly nudging the direction back into the way it should go.
Well observed, yeah, that's good. Thank you. I'll ask another question of everybody, because I'm interested to know if there's much scope still for freelance or beginning freelance in order to worm your way into a particular company or get some experience. So if we start over here again with Alex, what advice would you give for trying to get involved with freelance? How to approach it, or not to bother, or whatever it actually, whatever the advice actually might be.
So I guess one distinction I make is like between contracts and freelance. You get like short-term contracts, like 6 months with a studio, and that's one form. That's like kind of gig culture where you're like going 6 months here, 12 months there, 10 months here. I actually got my original foot in the door into AAA was through freelance as an outsourced artist for Decagon. And there's a lot of work there. Like, look, outsourced studios tend to have a high turnaround. Most people want to work in a AAA studio. So most of the outsourced vendors, you tend to get artists who come in, there's certain artists who rise to the top and they move on to the next studio and actually get in. There's no shortage of needing outsourced artists. So in terms of like freelance, if you're looking to get into AAA, like outsource is a great start point because you get to actually work on some big titles. You get to experience the quality that's expected without being overwhelmed, because when you get into the studio, you start to get into really deep pipelines and jumping through hoops to make certain things, whereas outsource tends to be assets which are a little bit more straightforward. There's a little bit more structure to it, and it's a little bit more entry friendly. So I guess you've got to make a choice of what you want to do. Do you want to do the gig culture, which is I did for a little bit, doing contract to contract, or do you want to do full freelance where you're doing probably I was doing outsourcing, I was working for ArtStation, I was working for Counterplay, and you're juggling a lot more plates when you're doing the sort of freelance culture. So I guess that's what the distinction I make for you, everyone who's thinking about it, is which one do you want to do? And it's not for everyone. I will say it's not for everyone. It is incredibly chaotic. Ours are not yours. By the times I've had one of my vendors say, "We need this change and we need it now," and I'm eating my dinner, and it's okay, well, we'll hop back on the PC and fix that. It's my responsibility. If I don't, I just won't get more hours again. There is definitely that component of it, and that's not for everybody. I think it's definitely. I would never turn my nose up to the freelance. Like I said, it got me my foot in the door. And there's always work there, I feel like. It'd be a long time before I think freelance work disappears.
What would you look for specifically in a freelancer's sort of output to actually interest you?
Good hourly rates. What I'm looking for, I guess, being longevity from artists. There's some outsourced studios out there who have, Sierra Division, for example. There's, great artists there. It isn't, juniors and students, there's really big names in the industry just choosing to work there. That's a huge green flag, because you go, you choose to work there rather than artists who have the capacity to work at Naughty Dog and they've chose to work at this company, and you go, okay, there's something here. So I think if you know the names there of there's reputable artists at that studio, it's a huge green flag. And then the flip side of that, if you go there and there's not a single name you know, and you don't know the founder and you don't know anybody, probably a little bit of a red flag. They'll probably be, we work with Epic, we work with these people, we work with these people, but there's no reputable names. There's a little bit of like, okay, I should be a little bit concerned here. Okay. So that's what I kind of look for.
Thanks very much. And Jonjo?
My experience with freelance has been probably different to most. I've freelanced with a few different companies, NVIDIA, Sentinart, and Sierra Division, all of which was during me having a full-time job. So it was stuff that I did in my own time after my work hours. It's tough to do, and most of it, though, came to me through my existing body of work. It's not stuff I applied for. It was through contacts that recommended me. It all kind of materialized through my network that pre-existed in the industry. So I've not ever looked for it. It's just kind of come my way. I think it's something that you kind of need specialisms for. I don't think you can be a good generalist. Well, I think there may be work in freelance for generalists, but at least from my perspective, what I've seen is that it really tends to be specialists who get headhunted for those roles. So I spent a long time honing my prop skills, which is why I got asked by NVIDIA to help them with their props. I had done those props gigs, so that kind of got me on to do vehicles for another thing. And, it just kind of snowballs. The more people that you work with, the more reputable you look, and then the more freelance gigs come in. But Beddows makes a good point in that, hourly rate is really important because I think in freelance, you're not beholden to like contracts like you are. Like there are less laws around it. It can be rife with abuse. I think there have been some gigs that I've looked at and I think just weren't worth the money. Like $18 an hour for asset creation it's not that that's a bad wage for some people, but compared to what a full-time gig might offer, it's really not great. Especially considering you have to do your own taxes, you don't get the benefits of full-time employment. I think freelance is good. You just need to be quite specialized to get the most out of it, I think.
That's a good observation, thank you. And Bartosz?
Well, in my case, I've not really had experience with freelance at all. Before I started in the industry, right after uni, I was experimenting with it. But from my experience, it was a bit tough because, first of all, I couldn't find actually any like freelance opportunities. And once someone actually reached out to me, they offered like terrible wage for it, which is basically like a week's worth of wage for a month's work. So that's basically my experience. I think working in industry, like at a set company as an animator, is probably easier because you get used to the rigs, to the rigging style of the technical animators, etc. And then you kind of just do your job much faster and much more efficiently. Whereas, possibly as an animator, you maybe are expected to rig the characters yourself. In freelance, I'm not sure how it goes, but that's basically all.
Well, they're just trying to pay the minimum wage, and you want to avoid.
I think it was below minimum wage.
Going down that route. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Man.
My experience, I was coming out of the first year of uni, and I was headhunted by Southern GFX in Frodsham. That's kind of like a freelance / outsource company. But it was a really fun time. I mean, at that age, I wasn't worried about money or anything. Like I was living with my parents, so those kind of thoughts weren't going into my mind. I was more just enticed by the fact that I was working on something different than my boss, who was sat next to me, working on something different than the guy who sat behind me. I was doing a crane for a military compound, and he was making the faces for a stop motion animation. But outside of that, like not a lot of thoughts were going through my mind when that was happening. I was really just focused on finishing uni and getting through education. But it was nice to have money. It was nice to see all the cool things that I signed an NDA for that I can't really talk about. That's really my thoughts on it. I don't have a lot of experience with it.
Clifford, how about you?
So I have my experience coming the other way, actually, as a producer, having to deal with freelancers. Again, coming back to that hourly rate point, just say, joking aside, if I can give advice to people looking to be freelancers, if someone has reached out to you with like a brief or like, hey, can you maybe provide me a sample or whatever, is I know in my personal experience, I've reached out to friends and they've been like, oh, I know I don't really have time for that. And it's like, I get that your time is valuable. I'm not asking for your work to be given away for free. But if I don't have something to show, I can't push you forward as like a candidate to give you work. You need to be proactive about chasing up your responsibilities and having something to demonstrate, meeting your briefs, saying, am I maybe competitive with other people I'm up against without also selling yourself short. The biggest one I can push for is like be proactive. There's so many times I've reached out to people like, hey, I remember you from university. You did really good work for either audio or 2D assets or whatever. I need that for a current game. Can you get me something? And they're like, yeah, I'll get that back to you. And then it just didn't happen in time. Weeks would go by, and it's like, well, we've already got another freelancer, and I can't really float your name again without big questions being asked of like, well, didn't we ask that person before? Why would we go to them again and not get anything? So there's definitely an element of it's very much your personal responsibility, for better or for worse. So I know it's not going to suit everyone, but for those that are considering it, always remember that it's you are your own boss, and that means whenever things are shipped and getting done on time.
Okay, that's an interesting angle on it, I've got to say. And Kieran?
Yeah, I mean, I've not had any formal freelance experience, but I've done some loose stuff in the background with ArtStation for about 6 months alongside a full-time job. And it's hard work to finish your day and then start your second day at work. But I think to take it on full-time, especially in the current climate that the industry is in at the moment, you just have to be exceptionally organized and proactive, like you were saying. You can't hide underneath a studio name or even necessarily background experience. It will be, you are only as good as your last thing that you did. And especially if you're freelancing, your reputation is going to matter the most. And in order to get and secure further work as a freelancer, you're going to have to maintain those relationships moving forward. It's not just a case of slipping into that work and then getting the next thing, because there's no guarantee that there's going to be a constant stream of clients or income in that respect. Again, I think I recommend everyone gets involved with that sort of thing, but just know that it's a different mindset, and there are kind of, if you value the security and predictability of a full-time job, then by all means don't go and freelance, because that can be a very chaotic world to be involved in if you're not ready or prepared for that way.
Okay, thank you. Good observations. And I'll expand a little bit on that. Not just the freelance work, but it'd be nice to think you would join a company and have a forever job that you would actually sort of have. But we all know at some point you're going to want to move on at some point. And so how do you equate that with your personal development? How do you equate that with when you decide it's time to move on? What are you looking for? Perhaps you don't want to say it, but what are you looking for in your next stage of your career? What would compel you to move on?
I think, unfortunately, this kills me to say, I had a conversation with a colleague about this, which is, I think a skill set which game developers need is to be able to read the room and see the writing on the wall of, oh, okay, that's gone wrong, that person left, this is going wrong, this might be somewhere I want to leave and I don't want to be around. I've done jobs in the past where I've been there for 6 months and realised I made a bad choice and I've decided to leave pretty quickly. You're not beholden to stick by your bad decisions. We all make bad choices sometimes. And I think being honest with yourself to go, oh, I chose to come to this place. I'm at this place which I care deeply about. And I'm seeing things go wrong which I think are wrong. And there's also there's certain people you'll meet in the studios who are kind of like the pillars. They're not higher ups, not leadership, just artists who are workhorses. They do their job, they're quiet, or they're good positive energy, and suddenly you notice that person's the one complaining, and it's the sort of the alarm bell. Well, you never complain. Why? Oh, okay, something's actually wrong here. This person's worried, I should be worried. So I think this skill set, which is very important to learn, is reading the room and just understanding, oh, these are markers for something that's potentially not good right now.
Right.
I know that's driven a lot of my career. Like seeing, for example, like there's big colleagues at past studios who are incredible. They were promised promotions and they're great and they literally carry productions. And then the game ships and it's like, oh, sorry, you can't have your promotion. And that's for me. I'm like, well, I know that the whole company knows this person carried a team. And they've not been rewarded. And then the other person needs to get rewarded. And then this, and you're like, oh, okay, something's amiss here. I maybe should look elsewhere. And I've been very lucky because I've made relatively smart choices when I've noticed that. And I feel that's why I've been relatively successful, is because I've been able to dodge bullets. It's not a nice thing to have to talk about, but I think that's a very important skill set.
I'm going to hurry everybody now because we're running very short time, so we can keep it to about 30 seconds. Jonjo, same thing, but concise.
Yeah.
Right.
There's so many reasons. You want a promotion and the company that you're working with doesn't have the space for it, or they refuse to give it to you. You're not happy with where the project's heading. You're maybe not enjoying the culture fit of the team. You want to try something new. You thought it'd be better than the job's turned out to be. Or an amazing opportunity has appeared that you just can't say no to with people that you really want to work with.
All good choices. Bartosz.
I mean, similar to Jonjo, it's all about like, there's a ton of different factors, right? There's, the money, the ambition, like you might just get bored of the project, you might want the promotion, etc. So I don't think there's much else to add to this.
No, I get there's a pattern for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's good. Matt.
Yeah, sometimes it's just art style. Like, say you're working on a realistic project, but you're a stylized artist. It's just about having the discipline to keep working on those stylized projects outside of work to keep those skills sharp. And just kind of working towards getting that job that you want, that you're comfortable in, that, you may have just got a job to get your foot in the door, sorry. But yeah, just discipline outside of work to have that set time of day where you are working towards those goals.
Thank you. And Clifford?
Sometimes you just make a bad read on a position. I know whenever I joined usability at Team 17, I went into it with very different expectations of what would actually be done. There was nothing inherently wrong with the team fit or the culture, even the role. It just wasn't what I wanted or what I needed. And sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and say, I made a mistake and, it isn't what I thought it was going to be and isn't what I need. And you just have to step away. And it's best to do that.
Thank you. And finally, Kieran, quickly.
Yeah, new skills, new people, new projects that you're more interested in working in. But sometimes the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And you have to be the change you want to see in the world, because ultimately studio culture is the culmination of individuals at a company. And when those cultural pillars leave, that's when things start getting shaky.
Great answer. Thank you very much. So thank you all. Much appreciated. Some good answers to some interesting questions. And I was going to answer just one final thing is that remember to vote. The machines are available. You've got 15 minutes to vote. I think the cutoff is 4:00. You'll use your wristbands to vote. So go away and vote. Thank you.